I will select the free option. And then they give me yet another chance to give them money. I already talked about this. The major difference is unlimited storage space for $25 a month, and there's other options as well. But to get the custom domain name, you have to pay them at least $2.99, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I will refuse the opportunity to pay the money, and I will.
Can you put just any email address?
OK. So the question was, can I put in just any email address? Just to look around, yes. We will see very quickly that there are certain functionalities that will not be open until you confirm it. So if you can't receive that email now or later, you will just get locked in. So yes, so if you want to continue using this, you have to pick an email that you can access. And I can access this email. So if we get there, I'll try to show those differences. Choose a password. I will type in something, not save it. Quick note, whatever you do, please log out when you leave. Yes. Everything you type in, everything you accidentally save on these computers will be deleted so that you're safe. OK, so if in case you're checking your email, please remember to shut down your browsers and log out before you leave this room. OK, I will say that again before I leave. So as they say, please use this time to confirm your email address. But you don't have to. So you should be able to just say continue, and it will pop up your WordPress website. And then this all should happen for everyone. Okay. Sometimes people are like, no, I didn't see that. But if you've gotten this far, it should pop up this left frame, show you something that says first blog post. And if you chose a different theme than I did, you'll see something different here. OK? OK, so what are we looking at here? We're looking at the WordPresscom. I'll call it the admin panel. And I'm calling it the admin panel because that's what they call it in the WordPress world. So they'll always say, go to your admin panel. If you're reading tutorials, if you're reading documentation, they'll say, go to the admin panel, click here, click there. This will happen. So this is the WordPress.com version of the WordPress admin panel. And we'll sort of maybe end the presentation with, why did I just make that distinction? We'll try to see the distinction real. So we'll start with, well, just quickly run down what's going on here. Most of the things you see here are part of WordPress jargon. WordPress has these major concepts: posts, pages, media, themes. I'm going to skip plugins and settings. These are all part of WordPress jargon, right? So everyone will say, go to your admin panel, click on settings, you'll find this. So these 5 things are common: posts, pages, media, 6 things. Themes, plugins, and settings are common between the software and how WordPress.com sets it up for you. And the first thing I'll look at, and perhaps even spend the rest of the time on, is themes. So as I said, what are themes? Themes are what your website looks like. And whatever theme you pick as your initial theme should show up, I guess, at the top left in this grid. Or oh, at the very top. Intergalactic. Oh, yeah, I got confused. So this is Intergalactic version 2. The one I picked, the current theme is Intergalactic. Notice that it says, if I go down here and I click on this little 3-button thing, it says activate. Okay. And that's another WordPress jargon. Everything has to be activated in WordPress for you to use it. Most commonly, your themes and your plugins. These are little pieces of functionality within your WordPress website, and you activate them in order to use them. You can activate and deactivate a theme any number of times. It doesn't matter. Okay. The theme is what your website looks like, which means it doesn't affect what your website contains. You can keep changing what your website contains and try out the different themes. The theme will not affect what the website contains. Okay? That is convention. It is very possible that someone writes a theme that tries to change the contents of your website. There's nothing in WordPress that actually stops that from happening other than the fact that people don't do it. And any theme that is written to do that will very quickly receive terrible ratings on WordPress.org. No one will use it. It won't get any downloads, and it'll just be considered a bad theme. Okay, so, but the upside and downside of open source software, the downside is that, well, anyone can do whatever they want. So someone can write a theme that changes all the content on your website. It decides that it's going to spell correct your whole website. Okay, so not a good idea. The upside, of course, is that because anyone can do what they want, a surprising number of people actually spend a lot of time looking at themes and checking if they're being written badly. And so you get a lot of very quick reports saying, oh, I just noticed this theme is doing this. That's not a good idea. And very quickly, it'll go down in ratings on WordPress.org. So that's the idea. You can always switch between themes. It won't change the content on your website. You don't have to worry what's going to happen. You can always go back and forth. And that's the purchase option. Some themes are free. Some themes are premium. On WordPress.com, as on most websites, there is no functional difference between free and premium themes. Some are just free, and some are just cost money, right? Like that's their business. That's how they make money. Free themes tend to have fewer options, tend to be less harder to configure, which makes sense. They want you to pay so that your life becomes easier. It's a trade-off, right? But otherwise, there's really no difference in any functional sense between free and premium. Yes.
Is that a one-time cost for the theme? It's not
Yes,
like a monthly thing.
that's a good question. What does the cost of a theme mean? Most cases, the theme is a one-time cost, which is basically an honor system situation, because you can download the theme and then use it as many times as you want. They can't really charge you, but I guess that works out for them.
Use it for multiple
Multiple WordPress websites, and there's no real way for them to charge you. And most people that write themes don't do that. They just charge you once, and it's like it's honor system. Hey, if you do use it more than once, you really should pay. But that's just the way it is. Sometimes themes, though, will have hook-in functionality, so they'll sort of call it a theme, but what it does is it does some cool stuff, like it might update your Google Drive documents into your WordPress website, and that they might charge a certain ongoing charge. They'll say, like, we will regularly update from your Google Drive everything into your website, but that costs $2 a month. And it'll be sort of within the theme, so it'll feel like you're paying ongoing charges for a theme, but again, it's a business model. They need some way to ensure revenue, because after all, once you buy the theme, it's open source and you can do whatever you want. So they're just ways of thinking about the way themes will cost. So that's the theme, and you can customize it. Well, let's quickly look at what that means in terms of customizing the theme. What I clicked on is in the admin panel menu under themes. There's a little button that says customize.
Also, current theme had customized. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you for saying that. So if you go back to the admin panel, you look at where it says current theme at the top. I believe that also has the customize button. But you should just get back here. This is the WordPress theme customizer. Most themes tend to have something that looks similar. So if you're going to play around, it might not be exactly the same on your theme, but it'll contain many of the same bars, tabs, or whatever you want to call them. And most of these tabs reflect the way we think about websites, right? What is a website to us? It contains colors. It contains fonts that you like to be able to choose and change. It usually tends to contain something at the top, something at the bottom, something off to the left and right. So we call the left and right things sidebars, header, footer. It tends to contain a logo, right? So the WordPress theme customizer tries to map that so that you're like, oh, what's in my header? well, maybe it's what is in this header image tab. And they try to use language that will make it easier for you to quickly get to what you're trying to access. And this is a good example of where, I said WordPress ease of use is like middling to maybe low. Because once you get to complex themes, it's really hard. They'll have 20 of these, and you're like, what? I want to change the font of this one thing, and I want to change the color. And you're struggling to remember. You have the cheat sheet this big. A lot of my clients do. I'll get to their office, they'll pull out their binder, WordPress binder, and we're like, oh, what's the problem today? One of the many things about a WordPress journey is that if you've never done it before, prepare yourself, especially if you really want to make a lot of changes and have a lot of flexibility, prepare yourself to learn and spend a lot of time on these admin panels, okay? But again, if you can get a lot done without having to worry too much. So it really is a question of how much how far do you want to go? And then the effort is going to pay off, but it does take some effort. So I'll quickly go back here because I do want to try and talk about plugins as well. But what we did do is, just to quickly say what we tried to make progress, we talked about some of these things that you're seeing on the WordPresscom admin panel. Borrow from WordPress terminology. This is a good way to get familiar with WordPress, and then if you migrate to having your own WordPress website, you can sort of, you've already gotten past some part of the learning curve. Themes, menus, plugins, settings, posts, and pages. I noticed that this screenshot is only 6 months old, but they already took that out. So WordPress.com changes the interface fairly frequently, and it's just something you have to kind of get used to. We did a customizing. We talked about free and premium, and then you can talk about how changing the theme does not change the behavior. And we talked about how that's convention. Okay, so a lot of these are conventions, and they're just the way WordPress works. A theme does not have to follow these conventions, but most themes that are good, that are rated highly, tend to follow these conventions. And what are some of the conventions? So when we say a theme means that that's what your website looks like. In the WordPress world, they describe it using 3 concepts, okay, which I've listed out here. The first concept is the layout is something called a template. And a theme usually consists of many templates. Okay, so if you have a typical blog website, it usually has 2 templates. One is a template of each individual post, and the other is a template for a list of all posts. And in fact, that is how WordPress started. WordPress started as a blogging service. And the very sort of initial part of WordPress was all about, you have posts, so we'll have one template that shows your post, and we have one template that shows a list of all posts. Okay? What's a typical aspect of a list of all posts? It is the number of posts, most recent post, a pagination feature, show the most recent 5 and then click to go next. These are all very typical aspects of that template. But more complex themes can now have many, many templates. And the theme contains all these templates, and you can pick and choose which one you want to use. So if you look at the documentation of a theme, it'll say 20 different templates to choose from. And you kind of have to read the documentation to understand, okay, this lays out my content this way. This lays out my content that way. Another concept is widgets. So you have a template, but then you also get to say, well, here's a little box, and I want to be able to place this box in different templates. So what's a typical box in a website? Could be, let's say, a list of all the ways of sharing my content on social media. So that's a widget. The widget says, you can add Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, to this widget. And then you can say, take the template number 5 in my theme and insert the widget at the top. Take template number 7 and insert the widget at the bottom. And typically it gives you a way to configure widgets. And then a third thing is that themes come with menu areas. So a theme will say, wherever you are on the website, there will be 1, 2, 3, usually 2 areas where there will be a menu. And the menu is there because that's how we look around on a website. You go to a website and you say, drop down, go around. And that is another WordPress sort of convention, that your theme should have menu areas, okay? Some of these conventions have already become dated. Menus were so important to the internet 15 years ago because that's how you found anything. You went to a website and you kind of clicked around. Today you just search, right? You don't go to Amazon, click on clothing, click on men's, click on socks. I mean, you just say what you want on Google, and then it just shows you that one thing, right? But WordPress is pre-Google, pre-search, and so menus were always a big part. So they said, well, if someone wants a website, they want menus, so we're going to just make that a very prominent part of themes.
I'm not seeing where a menu.
So since I realized this just yesterday, that it used to be on the admin panel, but if it's not, then click on Customize, and it should be under Customize.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that this is yet another thing you can't change if you don't confirm your email address. I have no idea why. That seems like a very arbitrary thing. The other thing that you can't do if you don't confirm an email address is you can't publish anything. You can create posts, but you can't show it to the internet. That seemed reasonable to me because they don't want robots creating tons and tons of websites and just sort of putting it out there, so that's a security issue. This seems just kind of obnoxious. Yeah. Okay, so we have officially 10 minutes, which I think is reasonable to talk about plugins. Or, as Catherine asked, I could just stop here and take questions for the rest of the 10 minutes. Any quick thoughts on what plugins? Plugins. Okay, keep moving. Yes, I'll take one question.
Can we find reputable plugins?
Okay, good. So it all kind of fits in. So yes, I will use this time to jump into that. So what are plugins? They are, as opposed to being about, where did I put it? I thought I put it somewhere. Oh, here it is. So themes are what your website looks like. Typically people will say plugins are what your website does. Very blurry distinction. Sometimes themes are all about what your website does. Sometimes plugins are kind of control what your website looks like, and it gets a little confusing. But the idea is you want to try and separate the two. So usually a plugin is something you have to choose with care, because the whole job of a plugin is to manipulate data on your website, right? And like that's the actual job of the plugin. And so it is, you need to allow it to do that, which also means that if it does it badly, you might lose data, or you might get out there in a way you didn't intend. So you have to really make sure you understand what your plugin is doing. With themes, it's a little less scary that way because all they're doing is changing the way your website looks. You switch back and you're okay. With a plugin, for example, with this plugin, we're going to publicize, use this to share our content on the internet, which means that we would have to be very careful because this plugin actually shares something to Twitter, and that once it is shared, it's shared, right? Or if it shares it and you didn't know, then it's now public knowledge. So plugins are usually about what your website does. Because my phone is dead, I cannot access my email and confirm it. Therefore, I cannot publish anything. Therefore, I cannot share it. So I'm going to have to content myself with just showing you rather than actually doing it, which really sucks. But and it sucks even more because I killed it by dropping it in the toilet bowl.
Oh, that's horrible.
Rice.
I actually tried that, so hopefully it'll come back alive. Yeah, I did the rice thing. Anyway, so WordPress.com offers a fixed list of plugins. Okay, that's it. Even though there are tens of thousands of plugins out there, WordPress.com will not allow you to use all of them. There's about 30 that you can use, and that's it. Any quick guesses as to why? Security. Okay, so plugins can wreak havoc on your website. WordPress.com takes some liability if your website ends up being the bot that killed the internet, so they don't want that to happen. So that's one thing you realize, first, you're like balancing options. WordPress.com has these limitations, but you can be sure that these plugins will not fail on you, right? So you have to ask yourself, all of these plugins come with extensive documentation. The Publicize plugin, the idea is that it will let you share to these specific social media websites. Again, you can't do anything else. So for example, Snapchat is not on here, right? So if you have a Snapchat account you want to share, Instagram is not on here. You won't be able to. You would have to use some other WordPress provider that lets you add more plugins. Slightly more expensive, but does give you more options, is a provider named WP Engine, WP for WordPress. Their basic plan starts at $25 a month rather than $3 a month, but they have way more options in terms of plugins and themes for that rate. Plugins will typically do two things. They'll do a lot of things, but as a beginning user, you want to look out for. Plugins will change the blog post creation screen. So I'm going to click on Add here just to show you an example. Because the Publicize plugin is activated, the blog post creation screen has a sharing option. So that's usually one thing that happens. You add a plugin, you activate it, and it will modify the screen in some way. The other thing a plugin will do is that it will add itself to the admin panel. So it'll either show up in this list, in this case it did, as sharing, or it shows up underneath the settings list. Again, this is convention. You'll find that it's not consistent. Some plugins will add stuff in here. Some plugins will require you to click on settings. Then you go and look for the sharing setting somewhere in this list. It's not consistent across plugins. I've noticed more and more plugins tend to decorate the screen, decorate the hell out of the screen. Excuse my French, but they've essentially started to use the screen as a little advertising service. So like they will find the blingiest icon possible to put in there. And for someone who's using a lot of plugins, you'll find that this screen becomes like a little bit of a neon arcade after a while. But that's usually where you want to look. If you're like, how do I configure this plugin? It's usually in here. So in this case, what I would do is if I wanted to be able to publish everything that I wrote on this blog to my Facebook account, I would say connect. It would then open up this thing and it'll say, go ahead and connect. And even though I think I remember my password to Twitter, I cannot post anything from this website because when you actually go in and add a web, when you try to publish, notice that it requires you to validate your email. So I can't do it. But if you have a Twitter account, you can go through this process. And to then answer your question, what does it mean to look at lots and lots of plugins? For a lot of people, it means going to WordPress.org. You could also just search on the internet, but I would say half your searches will bring you back here. And I would break it down into two major steps. Use at least 3 different ways of searching for the same thing. So if I'm like, I wish there was a plugin that lets me publish to my Twitter account, I would suggest you search for something like publish to Twitter. And you will get a list of plugins. Oh, sorry. I should have been in plugins first. Where's my search box? There we go. Publish to Twitter. And I'll get a list of plugins. But you'll notice that if I change just a little bit, share on Twitter, you'll get a list of another set of plugins. And I really advise you, if you're looking for plugins, trying to understand the whole world, like do at least 3, and then get a sense of what's useful. How do you compare plugins? This is like themes. Plugins are a journey, and the more time you spend on it, the better off you will be. This ordering is not necessarily the best or the most obvious, but every piece of information on here is useful. The ratings is the most obvious, but how many installs is extremely useful. whether it is tested with the most recent version of WordPress is extremely useful. Okay, the older the plugin is, and meaning it has not been tested with recent versions, the more the chances that there is a bug in it, and that it's a security hassle. So I would say, if anything, I would first look at these two rather than look at that. Okay, sorry, the star rating. Because to create a star rating, you have to actually type in a review. Like, they won't let you do that, and so a lot of people don't even review it. But it's very obvious that someone has downloaded it, and that gives you a sense of whether it's being used or not. Yes.
How do you add it? Like when you find, like from this to the WordPress.com thing, how do you add it?
Any questions on this?
Yeah, I'm not
Yes.
sure if you show an example of what a plugin is. I'm not clear what it does.
Okay, so let me answer that question, because to answer your question requires, I don't know if I can even show you because the limitations of this class. Yeah. So how would you know? You really have to read the documentation, which can be a little intimidating. But I would say start off with, have as minimal a list of requirements for what you want to do first. So start off by saying, let me just find a plugin that shares on Twitter. Don't try to find a plugin that does everything, because then you're left sort of comparing too many options. Work with the plugin that shares to Twitter, and then later see if you can find a plugin that shares to Twitter and Facebook. And that will make your journey a little bit easier, whatever the process is. So
So it's just like a function of the site, right? Like adding a plugin is like adding a function.
it is adding a function on the site. And the question is, this is intimidating, I can assure you. The first time you do this, you're like, what? Like, what is that? So always start with the least you need to do. Find a plugin that does just that, and it's easy to do that. And only when you find yourself saying, oh, I need a little bit more, then find the next plugin, deactivate the first one, activate the next one. But make sure, if at all you have the time to do this, make sure you have a test website, you test it out there, everything is working the way you expect it to. That's another good thing. So to try and answer your question, how would I actually install a plugin, which really will have to be the last question because I heard a bell.
No,
That was just you. Okay, yeah, okay. So they're not trying to kick me out. I will have to do a few different steps, but because WordPress.com actually limits the plugins that you can install, I'm going to have to go sort of through the back door, as it were, into the actual WordPress admin panel. So this is the admin panel that's in the WordPress software. And if you install WordPress yourself, this is usually what you start off with. And it can be a little intimidating and a little hard to use, and you're like, whoa, what just happened here? And how you would install a plugin is actually you would click on plugin over here, and you'll notice that there's a lot more options. Some of them are same as WordPress.com. The posts and the media and the plugins and then settings at the bottom, but then many of them are different. And when you click on here on a WordPress site that is not WordPress.com, it'll take you to a screen, which is actually the same screen as the search screen we just saw on WordPress.org. So the reason I have to do all of this is because I cannot actually access one of my own sites. But essentially, you will see a version of this. Literally, you'll see the exact same results on your own WordPress website when you search over here. And then instead of only seeing the results for every one of those panels, you'll see a little button that says install. And you click on it and it installs it. So the only difference is, which we're all going to have to imagine right now because I can't access my websites, is that you'll do the search. The search on WordPress actually goes to WordPress.org, and that search will then let you click on a button to install the plugin. Remember, you have to install and activate. So any installed plugin is by default deactivated, which is, again, for security. They don't want you to just mistakenly click the button and your whole site crashes. So you have to actually consciously go and say activate. You can deactivate it. It instantly stops working. So again, security. WordPress ensures that a deactivated plugin cannot do any more damage. Any damage it has already done, too bad. But at the very least, if you just deactivate it, WordPress ensures that that's it. From that point on, it will not participate in the rest of your website. So deactivating a plugin, you're safe from that point on. So yeah, so you'll see that the activate link over there. Quickly, I'm happy to sort of talk about the very last slide, which is limitations. So as we, so as we talked about, what are some of the possible limitations? We already noticed that they limit the plugins you can add. That's because they're trying to keep you secure, trying to keep you from shooting yourself in the foot. What if your website is hosted on WordPress.com and the company shuts down? WordPress.com offers you a way to export your content at any point. So they do give you a little bit of a safety valve there. Like you spent 3 years putting all your photos and your blog posts and pages. You can click of a button, they'll export all of it and give it to you. Okay, so relatively safe. There's some things you cannot export. So whatever themes you paid for would not be exportable on WordPress.com. But whatever content you do export, you can always import the content into a WordPress site you created by yourself. So you can always start off on WordPress.com, publish content, pull it out if you're ready, and then put it into your own WordPress website later. So you won't get the theme back, but you'll at least get all of your content out of there. You'd always think about how do costs grow with traffic. So again, as I said, most of us, WordPress.com has a reputation. They can handle thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of users a day, no problem. So they're highly reliable, very good company. But of course, beyond a certain point, that might be something to think about. And for some people, there is a question about privacy and personal security. At the end of the day, you are giving them some information about yourself. As we saw, not a whole lot. They just need an email address, can be a throwaway email address. They don't ask you for anything other than, well, credit card if you buy stuff. But so it's fairly low touch in terms of the amount of information you have to give them. But if you do feel like your content, in some sense, is something you want to protect and make sure it's very private, you might want to think about, well, having it on WordPress.com means that they, in principle, have access to it.
Well, in terms of other limitations of WordPress.com, one of the sites for the blog that we showed both the content and an HTML tab so that you could maybe make some content changes. But for the actual themes, is it possible to use the custom style sheets? Is that a limitation of WordPress.com?
So it's usually not a limitation of WordPress.com per se. It could be a limitation of the themes, and because they control which themes you can buy, the premium themes or the more expensive ones might be the ones that offer you more custom CSS access. So that might be how they sort of differentiate. They're like, well, this theme, it costs more money, but you can change all the CSS. This theme is free, but you can't change the CSS. But WordPress.com per se, I mean, I think that it's not a company-wide thing, but it might be a theme-based thing. Some of the themes, they actually have a revenue share, so it's kind of dependent on the theme writer that sold it to WordPress.com. So your mileage may vary based on which theme you pick. Yes?
Okay, well, when we first created our site, is that the site title? And then we connected that to our email address. Now, I did that exercise just for the class, but I really wanted to delete it, so because I don't want this associated with my email address. So how do you do that?
How do you change the site title as a whole? If
or
that's
delete it completely.
or delete it.
Start from scratch.
Usually, anything you want to change for the site as a whole is in settings. So So I would say is in the settings tab. So I would say in general, if you have a question, so in this case, the site title as a whole is under general, and I would change it over there. I think you can change most things except your personal email address, I believe, is the only thing that there's no way to change.
Oh, but there, I saw something that says delete site, so that, and all,
It would delete it for good.
for good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, if you're like, oh, this is sensitive information, I want to get rid of it, you delete it and it's all gone. But it's gone for good. You can't recover it. Cool. Well, thank you. So I will probably stay around for the 5 o'clock thing. So if you can stay, if you have more questions, and I can take some sort of questions for 5 minutes right now. But so quick, what was that? I can.
What's happening